Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, Dumbfounding Definitions, Dizzying Distinctions, and Diabolical Doctrines, a series sorting through some of the jargon of philosophy. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at what is a deodand. Now, a deodand is a term for an object or animal that causes a person's death, or in some cases injury, and was therefore forfeit by the owner. In older law, the owner forfeited rights to the deodand to a government or religious organization as penance for that object taking a life. For example, the animal was sometimes killed or sold to benefit the charitable cause or the victims' families. This practice was generally abolished following lobbying from railroad companies that did not want to forfeit their expensive locomotive engines that often caused many deaths. While this may seem like a straightforward and logical response, deodands raise many philosophical questions. Is the owner of an animal or object responsible for accidents that take place with it? Should the punishment be commensurate to the value of the object or the harm done? Does the animal deserve to die for killing someone, even if the animal does not have the same moral understanding of its actions? Are manufacturers morally responsible when their products kill people? This video is going to look at these questions and more. So, an ethical question related to deodands is whether or not an owner is responsible for the actions of something that they own. If I loan my neighbor my table saw, should I be required to give up that table saw if my neighbor accidentally kills themselves with it? Some have argued that it depends on whether or not I kept the saw in proper working condition, or if my negligence of not caring for the saw was what led to their death. It seems like there might be some situations where many would say I should bear moral and even legal responsibility if I gave them a dangerous saw, but others where it doesn't seem like I should have if it was their own negligence that led to their death. Animals raise more questions. While it may be clear what proper care for a table saw is, what if my animal attacks someone? Am I responsible for not training it better? It seems like there are some cases of even well-trained animals harming people. If you train your dog well, but one day it freaks out and attacks someone, are you responsible? Is your dog responsible? Does your dog deserve to die, either because it bears moral responsibility for its actions, because it should be punished for its own act, because you should be punished for your dog's actions, rather, to prevent it from happening in the future, or because the victim deserves justice, even if you and the dog do not actually bear any moral responsibility? Do any of those reasons fit? One of the reasons that deodands were so popular is they seem to check all of these boxes. Well, if we think the dog bears moral responsibility, we're going to kill the dog anyway. If we think you bear moral responsibility, we're going to take something away from you, i.e. your dog, and kill it, and so that's going to be a punishment for you. We're going to prevent the dog from doing this again in the future by killing it, and the victim is going to get some amount of justice because we're going to kill a dog because the dog murdered them. And so there are all of these things that it checks, and so it makes a certain degree of sense to have a deodand. But it raises all of these ethical questions of, wait a second, do dogs actually have the moral responsibility to make those kinds of choices? Should you be punished for the actions of something that you own, etc.? Your response to these questions likely has to do with your views on moral status and moral responsibility. Do animals have moral status on their own? In other words, are they the kind of things that wrongs can be done to independently of the people that care about them? If you think that they are, then you might be more likely to say, well, maybe the dog deserves a fair trial at least, or something like that. Another question, conversely, do animals have some level of moral responsibility? In other words, are they the kind of things that can take actions that are right or wrong and therefore be punished for it? In other words, should we be punishing the dog because the dog was able to make a moral decision? The first question is fiercely debated when discussing animal rights, vegetarianism, veganism, etc. The second question has seen arguments on both sides, with some arguing that we do teach animals to behave correctly. We punish them for doing wrong and reward them for doing right, so they have some amount of moral responsibility. Others argue that animals lack the rationality, consciousness, or foresight required to be held ethically or certainly legally responsible for their actions. They act on instinct, not reason, and so should not be held accountable for doing what many animals just do in the wild. The next step of this line of questioning is to ask if manufacturers bear responsibility for the actions of their products. If I am responsible for loaning my neighbor a poorly maintained table saw that kills them, it seems like manufacturers maybe should be responsible for selling dangerous products. But who should be held responsible? Shareholders? CEOs? Consultants? If a company knowingly overprescribed drugs that they knew were dangerously addictive, should they be held morally responsible? Should the family that owns the company? What about the consulting firm that recommended that business strategy to them? See the Sackler family, OxyContin, McKinsey, etc. What about cigarette companies selling products they know cause lung cancer? How is that importantly different from me loaning my neighbor a table saw that I know might kill him? Soda companies that are selling products they know cause obesity and diabetes? Gun manufacturers that are selling products that are actually designed to kill people? At what point are you responsible for the things that you give away or loan to others? One argument the railroad companies use to great effect against the Deodands is the idea of value. While Deodands may seem like a logical response, it seems like the cost should be proportionate to the negligence, not to the value of the object. If I kill someone with my luxury $200,000 car in a complete accident that's no fault of my own, and my friend kills someone else through his negligence and reckless driving using an old beat-up car that's maybe worth a few $100s, it doesn't seem right to make me sacrifice my expensive car, a greater total value, and have my friend only sacrifice his old car when he was more reckless than I was. And so it does seem like maybe what we should be changing is not the actual item that is gotten rid of, but valuing things based on the recklessness that was done, which is more in line with common law today. Now, this is, of course, assuming that my friend and I have similar total wealth, and just that I prioritize cars more while he prioritizes other things. Because if he was very poor and all he had in his life was this car that was worth a few $100s, it could be a great punishment for him to lose that. And if I had billions of dollars and I have many other $200,000 luxury cars, it's not actually that much of a loss for me to lose that. For more on this interesting question of the way that wealth impacts the value of things that we get, check out our book, Are All Lives Equal?, available now on Amazon. This also raises the question of whether a given object is made special by the things that it has done. Is the saw that murdered someone importantly different than any other saw I have lying around? Would it be sufficient to pay the value of the saw, or to get rid of a different saw, or do I need to get rid of that specific saw? One might argue that the particular object or animal should be destroyed because it is in some way faulty or aggressive in the case of an animal, and therefore getting rid of it would prevent future incidents. If I get rid of my perfectly good table saw and I keep the faulty table saw around, that doesn't really solve the problem. Others might argue that the specific object or animal should be destroyed for the sake of the victims, who might be re-traumatized every time they see the dog barking at them or they see me working on the table saw. In this way, the reason that the specific object is special is not something inherent to the object, but rather the meaning we as humans provide it, similar to how the drum set used by a famous musician or the typewriter used by a famous author might take on special significance in our minds and therefore gain greater value. I'm a skeptic, so I don't know the answers to any of these questions. Different ethical theories are going to provide different answers and criteria for moral responsibility, the correct punishments for things. And while Deodands are certainly a thing of the past, and few would argue for that exact concept being used again, it does seem like a lot of these questions can be applied to modern usage. There are some situations in which we are responsible for the actions of the objects we create or own, and it seems like there are some situations with which those specific objects should bear some of the cost of the harm that they cause. And so it's an interesting question of at what point do you draw that line? When does me loaning my neighbor a faulty table saw that I'm pretty sure will fall apart and kill them, when is that importantly different from a cigarette company selling you cigarettes that it is pretty sure will kill you? What do you think? Should we bring back Deodands? Do you bear responsibility for the harm done by your objects or animals? Should those be sacrificed because of it? Should your punishment be equivalent to your recklessness or to the value of the object or animal that caused the harm? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.